Hello, my name is John Stizinski. I'm the General Manager for Operations and Technical at NATA. Thank you for watching this short presentation in which I will be discussing NATA's new assessment approach for multi-site facilities. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we gather today and pay our respects to elders, past, present, and emerging. Over the next 15 minutes, I'm going to walk you through the changes to our assessment model for multi-site facilities, which comes into effect from January 2023. For our members, these changes are a revision to NATA's existing corporate accreditation processes. For those who may not be aware, corporate accreditation is the process where a facility maintains a single accreditation covering multiple physical sites from which accredited activities are performed. The purpose of a revised process is to provide our members with additional benefits in how NATA delivers our assessments by taking into account how a facility is structured and how it manages its activities across its sites. The accreditation process is to ensure the facility's competence as one entity and the reliability of results or other outputs of its accredited activities from any of its sites. The key change of a new model is to introduce a sampling approach of the accredited activities to be assessed at each site falling under the one accreditation. This approach has already been implemented for our human pathology accreditation program in December 2020, and a similar process has been in place for our sleep disorder services accreditation program. The feedback from members on the assessment process for these two programs is positive, and we are now extending a similar model to our other NATA accreditation programs as part of broad and considered member feedback. As with pathology and our sleep disorder services programs, the assessment approach will take into account how multi-site facilities are structured and how they control their processes in order to determine the sampling approach to be applied to each facility. The end result is to deliver a simple, holistic, and member-focused assessment model without losing current assessment rigor. The good news is that existing qualifying criteria as part of our current corporate accreditation policy remain unchanged. These criteria include a single management system is implemented across all sites, one NATA authorised representative is appointed, a primary or core site must be identified, the relevant accreditation criteria must be implemented at each site, and action taken to any non-conformity or non-conformities identified during an assessment of any site must consider all other applicable sites. There are some key changes which I will now walk through. Each multi-site facility will have a tailored assessment program developed for each accreditation cycle. The program will be based on how the facility is structured and manages or controls its processes and will be confirmed prior to the commencement of each accreditation cycle. We will discuss additional benefits and changes further on. So how will the new sampling approach for multi-site facilities be performed? The assessment program or the set of assessments scheduled during the accreditation cycle will identify the activities and services covered by the scope of accreditation to be reviewed at each assessment. The accreditation cycle will remain at 3 years, other than for our human pathology, sleep disorder services, and medical imaging accreditation program, where the cycle is 4 years. The assessment program for the latter 3 accreditation programs will remain unchanged and be as described in the NATA procedures for accreditation or the specific accreditation criteria for sleep disorder services, which describes the accreditation of branch sites. It's important to note the facility itself will be treated as a single entity and not as separate individual or independent sites. The tailored assessment program will sample the activities across all sites, taking into account the needs of any regulatory arrangements or other arrangements the facility may have with any of its customers, which require specific activities to always be assessed. In relation to the request for additions to the scope of accreditation, a revised process will also be implemented. Where the facility centrally manages the process for implementing the same activity across various sites, then a sampling approach will be adopted where the new activity may not need to be assessed at every site. It will, however, be expected the facility will provide information on how it will control and roll out the new activity to the applicable sites. As part of a new model, a number of processes will be implemented into how the accreditation cycle is managed by NATA, including a pre-cycle questionnaire will be sent to a facility prior to each accreditation cycle to request information on which processes facility centrally manages and from which sites. NATA will also request information on any regulatory or customer arrangements that may apply and affect the sampling approach to be adopted for assessing the sites. The information collected will be used to prepare the assessment program. Each site covered by the single accreditation will undergo a reassessment, starting with the primary site the facility has identified. The assessment of the primary site will include a review of the facility's management system. An assessment will be performed at least once every 2 years. However, it can be expected that this may be more frequent, especially as most facilities will have numerous sites. The assessment program can be modified during the cycle. For example, if significant changes occur or significant non-conformities are identified at any assessment. Surveillance visits will no longer be performed for multi-site accreditations. Mid and end of cycle client engagement activities will be undertaken during the accreditation cycle. These are an additional touch point between NATA and the facility outside of an assessment and allow us to discuss relevant issues that apply to the accreditation. We will also provide a summary of assessment findings during the engagement activity. And remote assessments may be used in defined situations, for example, to witness activities being performed at a customer's premises. This slide illustrates the assessment program. The green box represents the start of the accreditation cycle, with the assessment of a primary site, which includes review of a management system. The purple boxes represent the 2 client engagement activities, mid and end of the accreditation cycle. As I mentioned, these activities are an additional communication point between NATA and the facility, and a summary of assessment findings will be presented. The blue boxes collectively represent the assessments of each site performed throughout the accreditation cycle. So what are the key benefits of this initiative, which are not currently offered under our corporate accreditation policy? A tailored, or to use a more enticing word, a bespoke assessment program will be established for each facility. There will be a reduction in the duplication of assessing the same processes where these are performed at more than one site and if they are centrally managed. Centrally managed processes may include the management system, supervision or technical control of staff, validation of new or modified methods, monitoring of quality control data, and issuing of results. We will also be providing provision of an assessment findings summary report during the client engagement activities. These reports will provide the facility with a consolidated overview, which will allow the identification of trends, areas of risk and improvement opportunities at both the organisational level and site level. And we will have a new streamlined process for handling changes to the scope of accreditation, where the change or changes applied to more than one site. So what are the next steps? We will provide updates on any further developments as will be necessary, but some key next steps include there will be changes to the NATA accreditation criteria packages, which are available from our website at nata.com.au or our members portal. We'll be adding the new policy document called General Accreditation Criteria, Accreditation of Multi-Site Facilities, and we'll be updating the application form for changes to the scope of accreditation. Facilities who currently maintain corporate accreditation will transition to the new model from January 2023, when their current primary site is next due for assessment. A facility which maintains corporate accreditation now may transition earlier from January 2023 if it chooses, or not transition to the new process and revert to separate accreditation for each of its sites. Should you have any general questions in relation to the new model and/or revised process for accrediting multi-site facilities, or require more information, you can send an email to us at multisite@nata.com.au. Or if you have questions specific to your facility, please contact your NATA client coordinator. Thank you for watching this presentation and allowing me to provide you with information about the introduction of our multi-site accreditation process.